Hello. In our previous lecture, we looked at the corporate social responsibility and also the ethics. Ethics and social responsibility takes us to another important area of concern, that is the human resource management or the personnel management. In this lecture, I intend to talk about the various areas of human resource management, personnel management, and would like to give you quickly an overview of the history of human resource management, the definitions and concepts of personnel management, the basic functions of personnel management, and the strategic role of human resource management in the organization, and also the new trends facing human resources and particularly the human resource management departments, and also we will see what are the issues before one has to think about the human resource and people management. Whenever people work together, I think we basically assume that the issues are there and the issues become more important. So when you see personnel management, we always try and differentiate between whether it is a staff function or a line function, and most of the managers today very clearly as a function we see it as a staff function whose primary role is to help the organization achieve its goals through quality and quantity of human resources. But we will also argue a little later on that every manager is a personnel manager. Every manager has to perform set of personnel functions. However, we will start first this as a specialist function, and then as we move along we will see how these roles or who should perform these roles, part of this giving this human resource function. Personnel management, one can always, as we can see, it can be defined as planning, organizing, directing and controlling. As we have seen, these are like fundamentals of any management function of use the word procurement, development, compensation, integration and maintenance of people for the purpose of contributing towards the organizational goals. So that means we are talking about planning of the human resources and getting those talents on board and helping them to understand what is that they are supposed to do as a part of the organizing, and telling them that what is that they should do and what is that they should not do, and making sure that they do all the things what is required for the organization, and in that making sure that there is talent is attracted. That is, in terms of the recruitment and selection, we are talking about the procurement. Then they are inducted and they are trained and they are made to do what is required to be done as a part of the development, and then whatever they do they need that's to be rewarded as a part of the compensation, and at times their own agenda, their own individual requirements, individual needs may be a little different from the organizational expectations. So integrate them and making sure that their motivational levels are always in tune with the achievement of the organizational goals, and that is what we are talking about, the maintenance of the people and making sure all the time they are contributing and helping organization to achieve the goals. I think these are, it's in a nutshell what the personnel management is all about. But one need to see how these things have changed over a period of time. I think one can go back to the history as back as 1800s. 1854 is considered as when the first factory system got established in India. But then we will also see the initial scientific management movements. So they started focusing on the processes, the cost reduction and also the pay for performance. I think the early studies of what people talk about the Taylorism, the Taylorism, that work study, time study, motion study, these were deployed very extensively, and assumption is that every job has one standard method of doing, and that could be understood and that could be measured, that could be taught, and then we work towards that. And also the creating the as simple methods as possible, and then creating the rules of the game. But then we started seeing the changes in the management discipline. The human relations model became very important in the 20s to 40s. As people started seeing the role of psychology, the role of human relations, and particularly the experiments of what the Hawthorne experiment brought these ideas of the employees are not passive, but they do have perceptions, they do have perspectives, and you need to see on the working conditions, the supervisory style, and also the management philosophy of recognizing the individual talent, individual contribution, and also the role of recognition. And once these thoughts were brought to the table, the concerns of the human resource management was moved away from traditional providing the basics to welfareism to involving the people. We also see the human resource movement very clearly the 1990s and beyond. To talk about quickly the kind of conditions what prevailed in 1840s and 1850s, the issues of the employment of children, the employment of women, and the very extended work situations, but also very oppressive conditions where there were no toilets, there were no drinking water, there were no facilities at all. And then safety was always an issue, and food was an important consideration. I think with those things of 1850s, when different committees, different people with good minds have seen that they demanded such of changes to be coming in. And then it came, in terms of the early 20s, that is 1920s to 1950, if you see, it is the world wars, the requirement of continuous work at the shop floor, and also the manufacturing and the basic necessity of maintenance of peace. But then we also saw the culture of the people who moved from their agricultural lands and who worked in the organization. So integration of them was not an easy process. So that means people had to be taken care of for their discipline because they had no culture of the industry, and they had to be taken care of in terms of their absenteeism and also making available the required number of people. So the personnel function was more focused on headhunting of the kind what we are seeing today, but the labor managers were asked to do such things in the 20s, and also making sure that there is a time management in terms of the time office, and also the canteen which provided the food of what people like, and which is much more a kind of a subsidy and a welfare kind of an activity. But this also saw the growth of welfare and the role of the welfare officers. The important industrial legislations, the Trade Unions Act, the Industrial Disputes Act, which came into the picture in the 1947, and also the Employment Standing Orders Act, all helped in defining the role and relationship between the management and the employees and the workers. And on the other side, the Factories Act, some of the Social Service Act provided what are the minimum labor standards. So it took care of the health, welfare and safety of the employees, and also contributed to the appointment of professionals to handle these activities in the organization. It insisted that one who is having a background in the social welfare to be appointed as welfare officers under the Factories Act of 1948. I think these are all some of the developments and very very subtle but brought several qualitative changes in the role of the HR, in the role of personnel management. But it moved from administration, personnel administration, to a personnel management in 60s to 80s, and then we started talking about much more in the name of human resource management. So what I intend to convey is, even though no doubt we are using these words, the human resource management currently, but what started as personnel administration and personnel management, that is what we are really focusing on. So today the basic things is that recruitment, selection, then we moved into the aspects of compensation, then to industrial relations, bargaining, then to the welfare, and then also to the aspects of training and development and organization development. So we have today several of these activities have been now part of the organization. So the operation of the personnel function is dependent on basically the broad strategy, the policies, and the structure of the organization. And when you see the main functions, main factor which influence the operation of personnel functions could be many, but always one can list few. Whether the organization is geographically dispersed or centralized. So the geographical distribution has to take care of many variations and the cultures, and whether they can be centrally controlled or it should be the policies and practices should cover the details. Then also whether it's a manufacturing or a service organization. Another important thing is whether it is labor intensive or capital intensive. And when you see the refineries, they are highly capital intensive. When you see the mines, they are all capital intensive. But when you see the organizations which make these garments, which make like this printing industry, they many times are very, very labor intensive. So there are construction today, for example, is labor intensive. So when you see human resource management or personnel management, we need to see whether the organization is labor intensive or it is the capital intensive. And then we should also see what are the competitive posture assumed by the top management. What is that they are trying to do? Are they working on quality? Are they working on quantity? Are they working on the delivery? What are the pressures of the organization? And what is this top management is trying to create value in the marketplace? Whatever may be the organization strategies and policies, right? The personnel or human resource function has to facilitate the achievement of the organizational goals. It has to do this through the basic functions of recruitment, that means attracting the best of the talents possible, and selection, choosing some of the best of the people who will deliver the details, the activities of the organization towards making some things happen, and training, building abilities, compensation, and the whatever we talk of the various activities could be clubbed under these personnel functions. So when you see this, the objectives of personnel management are to accomplish the organizational goals and also support its strategies. So it must develop its own objectives and strategies. So when we are talking about the organizational objectives and goals must be translated into HR objectives and HR strategies so that it is in tune with, in alignment with. And the objectives of this is very clearly to establish employee recruitment and selection systems for hiring some of the best possible employees consistent with the organization needs. So that means you must see who are the people who have the abilities, maybe which are the institutions, which are the regions where some of these best of the talents are available, and these talents must be attracted first in order to select, and then select some of these best of the employees, inducting them, grooming them, and then making sure that they are capable of meeting the organizational expectations. Another important thing is we take the best of the talent, but also helping them to improve their capabilities, meeting some of their own personal aspirations. So maximizing the potential of each employee in order both to attain organizational goals as well as to ensure the individual's career growth. It should help them to understand their own aspirations in relation to the opportunities available, so that they can get into the self-developmental activities and work in areas where they can contribute through their experience of what they can do to meet the expectations of the organization. So that means we are trying to meet individual needs as well as the goals of the organization. The potential development becomes another important consideration of personnel management. The third important objective is to retain employees whose performance helps organization realize its goals and to release those whose performance is unsatisfactory. So the talent attraction, talent retention is an important aspect of human resource management. But at the same time, we should also see those people who are not able to adjust. They must be helped, they must be corrected. That means when they are not able to contribute much, their counseling must be done, they must be told what is that they should do individually or what is that others can do to help them to do things better. If these things are not possible, then they must be provided opportunities to go and contribute in some other organization. But unsatisfactory performance must be understood and must be corrected. The next important objective is to ensure organizational compliance with legal systems that are applicable to personnel management function. As you see, it is the employee state insurance, it could be the safety standards, or it is provision of the health and welfare benefits, or to making sure that the employees know the conduct rules, compliance with respect to the Standing Orders Act. When dispute arise, responding in a positive way. These are all, that means several of the laws of the land must be respected and also must be complied with. The idea is that the personnel function, personnel management has to meet the organizational expectations, but also take care of the legal and the employee requirements. So one can see what are some of the techniques or what are the simplest of the practices. One can go on, but some of the basics is in terms of this job analysis and design. So basically we start with writing job descriptions and writing job specification. All the details of the jobs are collected, analyzed systematically, and then record who is the best person who can meet the expectations of the job. Then we also try and see where are these people. So the human resource planning, and you try and see what are the sources from which we can get these people on board. And the next point is the forecasting the personnel needs based on the organizational objectives. How can we meet the organizational requirements in terms of external as well as the internal resources. So the existing people can be moved through transfers, through promotion, or through some developmental things. And if those things are not possible through staffing or through development, then you have to get people from externally. So how can you recruit people and put them on to the task, and making sure there are a lot of pre-employment activities, that is conduct of the test, screening, checking their past histories, making sure that the kind of records what they have are correct and true, and those facts and figures to be matched with the job expectations, and to make sure that the specifications are met by this new employee. So, there are a lot of these pre-employment activities. Then you know very clearly these employee testing and selection, that the use of the psychological test and maybe the group discussions and written tests, the interviews, then also making sure that the individual is able to do through some kind of a work samples, then the making sure that the opportunities are given for the individual to work through, then conducting of this background investigation, and many organizations today insist upon that the clear records, and the organization also must maintain that there is no criminal records against the employees, and conduct of the interviews, so that not only you go by the records of the individual, but also see actual behavior and aspirations of the individual. When you see the other important function is the training and development, analyzing the training needs, based on the expected performance and the actual performance as assessed by the supervisors, as understood by the superiors, and also making sure that the individual aspirations and individual's own analysis are taken into consideration while doing this training need analysis, and then using various methods of training to fulfill these needs. That is the on the job training as well as off the job training. So, making sure that the supervisors help people to understand and do things better. So, that is what we are talking about as the OJTs, the making of the development happen on the job, and evaluating the training outcomes. That means whether the training activities both on as well as off the job have delivered the expected results or not. When you see the training and development, the inputs also have to come in terms of the performance appraisals and the management of the performance itself. So, that means there is a good dialogue between the supervisors and the subordinate, one-on-one, analyzing and understanding what is that they contributed most and what is that they have not, what is that they should focus on, and then what is that they should achieve with what resources. I think that is what we are talking as a kind of a performance appraisal, as well as building a culture of openness and frank and free exchange of views between the boss subordinates, and helping the individuals to understand what is expected of the organization in general, and specifically what their job is supposed to do and make a difference to the others and to the organization. Another important thing is about the managing careers. People have aspirations, people would like to see the progress, people would like to derive the satisfaction based on appreciation, based on contribution, based on involvement. I think career means it is more than money, career means more than promotion. So, managing careers would involve actively creating opportunities for the people to realize their potential and contributing successfully not only on the one job, but different jobs of the organization, which provides meaning, provides excitement, provides an internal intrinsic charge in the individuals. I think that is what we are talking as a part of the managing careers. Then we are also talking about the compensation. Compensation related activities are many, but basically to determining the pay rates, either an hourly rate or a piece rate or a daily rate or a monthly rate. So, one need to decide how should you pay, or what is that kind of a payment rates are. These payment rates can be designed through different methods. One could be done through the salary surveys. Salary surveys could be done based on the area in which the organization is functioning, what the neighboring organizations are paying. One can also conduct a study within that industry and then conduct this kind of a salary surveys. So, either industry specific data or the region specific data would help to see what could be the best pay rate. And similarly, the job evaluation method. The job evaluation to determine the relative worth of the jobs within the organization. One can follow simple ranking method where arranging all the jobs one above the other to see which is lowest and which is the highest. Example could be worker, supervisor and the manager, and within the worker different designations can be placed in different positions to see their relative importance. We can follow the second method is the grading method. In the grading method, the salary scales are decided first and different scales are arranged, and then all the current designations are placed in different grades, so that sometimes we see a security guard could be placed in the lower level, a gas cutter could be placed at a little higher level based on the skill, based on the education, based on the specific training required. So, depending upon the skills, depending on the experience, depending on the overall competence what people talk about, the grading method could help. But one can also go a little beyond this ranking and grading method as part of the job evaluation. One can also deploy the factor comparison method. In factor comparison method, in brief, we pick about 7 or 8 relevant dimensions of the job, which could be the education, the work experience, the responsibility for people or responsibility for things, working conditions, such factors. One can pick such factors and compare a set of jobs. When you compare such of jobs, then you are able to think in terms of 7 factors in a scale of 1 to 5, which is little more, which is little less, and then with that kind of a relative comparisons, you can decide what is the relative worth of the job. However, in a factor comparison method, we are not giving different importance to different factors, because all the 7 factors are treated as same and similar. So, there is an improved version of this, what people call it as a point rating method. Point rating method, we give different points for different of these factors, and then together you can arrive at what could be the relative worth of the jobs. So, that means we may give about 80 for the education, 40 points for training, maybe 60 points for the work experience, another 80 points for working conditions and the nature of supervision, things like that, where the different points are provided first, and then in the points then you take each job and compare how much of this. Now, typically for each year of training you may provide about 8 points. So, 5 years of additional training apart from schooling means the job gets about 40 points. Please look at the focus is in job evaluation is not the person, but the job itself. The job itself and the factors and the factor points need to be worked through. So, there are manuals and methodologies are available. And once this is done, the compensation decisions also depends that grouping of similar jobs into pay grades, and the pay grades, and then pricing each of the pay grade, and then possibly fine tuning the pay rates through bargaining, through discussion, through verification. And once the compensation aspects are taken care of, then one need to get into the financial incentives. Financial incentives in terms of the money, the time rate or the piece rate or the whatever the people have done the extra, in order to provide that kind of a motivation, in order to provide that kind of a recognition for their contribution. So, the compensation and the rewards become very critical aspect of the personnel management. And the compensation also would include in terms of the benefits and the services. We are using this word like cost to the company, but there are many related costs like insurance, vacations, holidays, pension, and also some of the personal services. The personal services such as the providing for many of the employee benefits, which could be the library benefit, or you're providing free utensils, or providing the house on lease. So, the use of the company car, use of the telephone, use of the cell phone, or any of such things which could go from one end to the other as the employee benefits. So, the benefits and services also to be part of this compensation. And then another important thing is the employee relations. Employee relations, industrial relations will come as an important dimension of personnel management. The first of all, it is the ethics and the fair treatment at work, where employee feels that he has every right to express, he feels there is a meaning and growth in the work whatever the individual is doing, and then the information what was provided at the time of recruitment and the kind of practices are not too different, and people feel that they are treated as individuals, not as very mechanical, or where they are treated as not as human beings. Another important point is the employee disciplining. People are told, people are educated, people are prevented from doing any misconduct or misbehavior, and also actively engaged whenever they have problems. So, people try to see not the symptoms but the causes. For example, the employee late coming could be understood in terms of what the individual problems are, and it could be about somebody is sick in the family, somebody has borrowed the money, someone is working some other place to increase one's own level of income. So, that means many of these things need to be understood, and you correct those causes so that the discipline can be improved. So, the late coming can be improved. Similarly, we talk about the labor relations. The labor relations, the union and the management relationship, what is called the industrial relations. In the industrial relations, you try and look at all the relevant laws, particularly when it comes to the change, a notice of change to be served, then you need to make sure that any rationalization and other things are done systematically. Domestic inquiry and other things are conducted whenever the disciplinary matters are involved. All the important people are told about the kind of actions are being negotiated, so that a minor difference will not result into a kind of a major conflict before the organization. And also handling such grievances, and many a times getting into the collective bargaining, where the unions present a charter of demands to the management, and the management looks at the charter of demands and responds to their requirements. And similarly, the employee safety, health and occupational aspects, and also the law relating to some of these things. Maybe it's a Workmen's Compensation Act, or the legislations leading to the workplace injuries are taken care of, and also the health hazards at the workplace are both in terms of preventive and crisis management aspects are taken care of with the employee relations. And also today we are talking about managing cultural diversity, or getting into this managing global human resources. Personal management today, to meet the aspects of diversity, we are using this word inclusive society. Different groups, different cultural background, different orientations, but need to work together to build. And so towards that, if you see, there are many personnel and human resource activities. So they are provided HR policies. So you have to design an effective organizational structure, and the structure which provides for the required delegation of powers, the control of resources, the specialization versus the generalist and things like that, and also securing optimum working conditions where people do have opportunities to relax and contribute, and defining work roles and relationships, that who should be the leader, who are the support people, and what is the work group, and avoiding the ambiguity, providing that kind of a required clarity. And also the people who have to advise, people have to give support, maybe in finance or it in HR. So giving that kind of a support structures. We also talk about HR and personnel activities in terms of the manpower planning and employment. So when the organization need to forecast the current requirements as well as the future requirements, and when it is always easy to employ people, it is not desirable and it is always difficult to get rid of the employees. We are using this word right sizing and things like that. So it is important to see how people can be helped and provide that kind of right opportunities throughout their stay. So the employment practices are extremely important. Or if you say if there are not good practices, means it would always result in layoff, it would result in retrenchment and many crises which can come because of not providing the sufficient work. Another dimension which I have already explored is to deploy the salary and wage administration systems, including that kind of a reward systems and the design of the organization. And one should also see the education and training and development. How do we talk about the relationships? How do we help people to have that required services, welfare and the related benefits? The purpose of HR or personnel policies to improve as basically the morale of the staff. The morale of the staff is belongingness, that they are part of the organization, so that you get that willing cooperation and you evoke that willing cooperation towards the attainment of the organizational performance or the operational performance. But the challenges of today could be many, but quickly to run through that we do have the labor force in any organization. As you see, if you don't take a proactive step, a corrective step, you will run into the issues of the aging workforce. And large organizations always feel, how do we keep the average age of the organization as low as possible? Another is in terms of the increasing levels of educated manpower. So more and more people with the kind of education they would like to, they will have and come, and the organization what is that it would like to have, and there could be a kind of a positive gap. That means you are getting people with much more education and much more training than what you can afford, kind of a thing. So that means people come with their aspiration, people do look for growth opportunities. And similarly we are seeing that shift from manufacturing economy to service economy. So that means it is not only you produced, but today you also make money, you also get your brand equity, you also get the image of the company through providing service. So selling, supplying machinery, just producing quantities are important, but there are many more things to be done, and that is what we are talking about in terms of getting into this kind of a service economy. And the increased number of dual income career families. So there are times where you cannot decide about only your employee, but also you have to see what the employee spouse is doing and provide opportunities for both. Otherwise there will be resistance for change, there will be resistance for development. And we are also seeing increased number of women in the workforce as well as the minorities. So as people become minorities, they all become sensitive. Similarly in the workplace, people feel that they are at a disadvantage. So it is important to create both gender related as well as these minority related activities to build confidence and help people to have the right perceptions in the workplace. And we are talking about the kind of environment what we are seeing. The organizations are facing economic, technological, political, social, demographic, legal and kind of a cultural kind of a challenges. So the economic conditions are increasing competitive pressures, more liberalization, more opportunities for the foreign companies to enter the Indian market. So suddenly you see that the margins what you have are not sufficient to do all the things whatever you require. Similarly, the technological new innovations, new pressures are coming on the organization to continuously invest in technology which contributes for better performance and better efficiency, but may lead to reduction of labor force. And also the political system of putting pressure on the organization that they have to move towards inclusive society, employment of people with minority, people who speak the local language. So there are political pressures on the organization to understand and respond. And similarly, there are social pressures. The social pressures for taking the local people or providing better opportunities. And we are also seeing the demographic changes in terms of that pool of people available are much more, and more educated people are getting into the organization. So that's the time where organizations, we are seeing that the kind of diversity what one would like to have, but that also demands help people to develop the tolerance, help people to work in teams, and they getting into the legal compliance and also deal with cultural aspects of the workforce. The challenges of each of these things can be run through quickly. As I mentioned earlier, it is the global economy, it is the expansion of this indigenous organization to other countries and the labor markets. So it depends upon the specific the country's economic conditions if an Indian organization has to move to the other places and other situations. And similarly, when we are looking at the labor market conditions and the labor unions, that we see how many people are available, what are the local economic conditions. Some situations we see large number of people apply, but many people don't remain. So there is attrition. Sometimes people apply, but there is low attrition. So what is the local climate? So, and also what kind of people come to the organization? If the workforce is unionized, are they very aggressive and militant, or are they very supportive and cooperative? So we need to understand the labor market conditions and the labor unions. And another trend and the challenge is also the HR in relation to the productivity. So there are many core activities are being outsourced. The so-called earlier where the organization person has to do these things are being given out. Could be the maintenance of the vehicles, the drivers, the security guards. Then we are seeing the building and building maintenance, and many of these things are being done by the outsiders or the temporary workers. Then we are also seeing the decreasing in terms of the how do we increase this kind of productivity, and then how do we increase the flexibility in terms of with the same less number of people should be able to do more and are also able to deal with volumes. Hotel industry experience this kind of a situation. Volumes sometimes are very high, sometimes are less. So that means having the same labor force, you should be able to do different things of the organization. And also there is a decrease in number of permanent workers. So when new such temporary people come in, how do you ensure that all the things are done? And then also the just contract. So that means you have to develop the conditions and the context and renew or develop the new contracts. And when you are seeing this, the HR can help increase productivity by ensuring that workers are happy, workers are satisfied, and it also involves finding better and more efficient ways to meet objectives, working on improving quality of life, also the retaining and sometimes outplacement. Outplacement is where people are given opportunities to work in some other areas. And technology, as I mentioned earlier, today we are extensively talking about the computerization, which brings the increased flexibility and also the movement when and where work is done, and then decreasing the geographical barriers. And now we are talking about new issues arising around technology. Only as an example, about the concerns over data control, rights to privacy, and using technology to monitor employees. And then use of these HRIS, human resource information systems, to aid the HR departments in keeping the data and tracking the data. And the changing workforce we are talking about today very extensively, the information workers who are able to work with data, transmit, and those who produce the data, so it's a fastest growing segment. Then there are also employed in the area of manufacturing and the service sector. The growth of manufacturing service sector has been is pretty less compared to the other sector, but the challenges of managing them are much different. So the significant portion of workforce, we are seeing the growth coming, almost about 86% of the growth has been attributed to the service sector. And as I mentioned, the demographic challenges are the composition of the workforce, increased women in the workplace, and then a lot of immigrants and coming to this kind of a job market, as well as this aging workforce. So we have to see how do we create the need for increased accessibility for disabled persons, people with handicaps, and then also the shift in worker focus and changes in attitudes towards this kind of a work-life balance. Some people are they are thinking that there is a kind of a burnout. And similarly, the cultural challenges when you have an ethnic kind of a diversity, where people are seeing their own work challenges, work issues of talking about their culture against the others. So one need to see the kind of differences, the complementarity, and how this can be leveraged to the best of the organization. So it becomes extremely important for personnel management professional to understand the internal environment, organizational culture, values, beliefs, and assumptions, and also see the positive dimension of the retention and recruitment success, and also the climate of the organization in supporting good work, in supporting the teamwork, in recognition, in understanding the people aspirations, and providing appropriate leadership where the best of the people can perform and contribute. So where do HR departments fit into the strategic planning of a company becomes an important another issue, and how are HR departments set up and the professional within this HR system and HR organization. So the strategic role of HR management comes in terms of the need to have a HR strategy, to have direction and the game plan, both in terms of the attracting people, retaining them, and creating opportunities for them to contribute successfully. So they must encompass the large picture of the organizational priorities and the mission, and to be effective it must obtain, develop, maintain, retain the right combination of workers to facilitate these goals. I think each of these words of training and developing and maintaining and retaining I am re-emphasizing so that the HR meets that kind of a strategic objectives. It should also do the required scanning. It should see what are the other competitors' policies and the programs, and then look at some of the company's organization strengths and weaknesses in terms of the creating the image for the for the outsiders, and help organization to see its strategic plans in terms of the expansion, cutting cost, or the mergers and the acquisitions and things like that. So in that kind of a situation, one can be very reactive or the proactive. Proactive HR management helps in identifying and anticipating problems before the damage is caused, and also the production is maintained or interruptions are reduced. So when we are also talking about this HR audit, we evaluate HR department's effectiveness, and in terms of how it is meeting the strategic effectiveness, how it is meeting legal compliances, and how effective the various programs. It is often compared to other organizations, and also one can do the cost benefit analysis. And typically this is how an organization of HR department would be. One designations could vary from one organization to the other, but there are many HR duties are assumed by the management: employment, compensation, training, safety, union, and then within that you do have recruiter, analyst, or a trainee, or a staff specialist, or an employee counselor. So there is a service role of HR department. It exists to serve internal customers, managers, employees, and organization, and also it has to do an advisory role, and then can also have an authority to make decisions which is permitted by the company with respect to discipline and things like that, and also certain areas of efficiency and consistency and benefits when you are negotiating. But when you see the new trends facing HR departments, we are seeing that there is an expanded use of contingent workers, short-term workers. I think this is one of the trends. Another is the managing diversity, having people with different backgrounds and different experiences, different educational qualifications, and creating a common mindset in them, and also extremely family friendly benefits, that is going beyond the employee and integrating the family of the employee to the organization and meeting the organizational expectations. The question also comes where these HRM professional or how they are coming. So the HR professionals, one can see they are coming through the certified programs of various institutions, coming under the purview of the Ministry of Human Resource Development, through the university systems, through various institutions recognized by the All India Council for Technical Education in terms of the MBA or Masters of Social Work, and similar programs in Masters of Personal Management. And there is also a certification program by the National Institute of Personal Management, the national body. And also one can think of various degrees with human resource management specialization. All of these will give the kind of a background of what this human resource management is all about, and the kind of preparation required to perform these duties. Most of the programs are of 2 to 3 years duration, which helps people to get the picture of the activities and the various dimensions. So far we have seen the definition and the concept of and history of personnel management, and basic functions of personnel management, and also we saw the role of this benefits, need and objectives of manpower planning, human resource planning process in a nutshell. And what we will do in the next session, we will get into some more details of this personnel management functions in terms of manpower planning and various models and practices.